They couldn't even come up with an original crime for Trump. Of course, they just project one that they did themselves.
Ultimately, the case is really about nothing other than hush payments to a porn star who alleges she had an affair with Donald Trump, even though previously she denied that, and the claim that in the internal books of the Trump organization, those payments to Michael Cohen, which then went to Stormy Daniels, were misclassified. So the case itself is just trivial, especially as a felony. And so, although I've always been a believer in trying to lift and eliminate this two-tier justice system where political elites and financial elites really are exempt in so many ways, not obviously absolutely, but overwhelmingly, I would be applauding this if I thought that this were fairly applied. The reality is there's only one person in all of the United States who would have been charged with 34 felonies or even one felony for having done this, and that person's name is Donald Trump. Democrats have been explicit about how they know that their best chance for winning is to ensure that Donald Trump becomes a felon before the election. Just to give you a sense for the absurdity of trying to suggest this was sort of the rule of law being applied equally, here from the New York Post in March 2020, and you can 2022 rather. You can mock the New York Post if you want. The story that they did on Hunter Biden's laptop turned out to be completely true, even though big tech and the media and the CIA all united to say it was Russian disinformation, and the facts that they're describing here are very easily verifiable. The headline is the Clinton campaign, the DNC, was fined by the Federal Election Commission for lying about the Steele dossier payments. Quote, the Federal Election Commission has fined both Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign and the Democratic National Committee for lying about how they spent money used to fund the now debunked Steele dossier on former President Donald Trump. The Clinton campaign and the DNC will be forced to pay $8,000 and $105,000 respectively for mislabeling payments that ultimately went to Fusion GPS, the consulting firm that commissioned the dossier according to FEC documents viewed by the Post. The fine stems from a complaint originally filed in 2018 by the Coolidge-Reagan Foundation, which was informed of the outcome on Tuesday. Now, obviously, that seems extremely similar to what Trump has been accused of. They wanted those payments to be hidden because they wanted to claim that they weren't the ones funding and instigating this fraudulent Steele dossier, and it turns out they absolutely were. And the intent was obviously to shield Hillary Clinton from damaging revelations, which is exactly the theory that they just convicted Trump on the basis of.
Bill and Hillary, everybody else has done not only the exact same thing Donald Trump did, they did it right out in public. Hillary Clinton falsified her campaign finance thing to lie about funding the Steele dossier. She lied to the FBI about it for a year. It was all made up. The Steele dossier was all made up.
Through further cross-examination, Cohen told me that he knew there was money missing from the Trump inauguration.
I see where you are now. Thank you.
Okay, and then on the next page, into that first paragraph, Cohen decided that while he didn't believe the allegation of the Stormy Daniels story, that he thought the story would be embarrassing for Trump and especially for Melania, so he decided he would take care of it himself.
Absolutely, and that is contrary to what this guy testified to in court in New York yesterday.
Well, and what's not being talked about is your next paragraph, like the reason and his motivation for that. So if you could just kind of walk through that for the committee.
Yeah, obviously, when we started to talk about the NDAs, and this is the very first meeting at the Regency Hotel, when, by the way, Rudy Giuliani was not involved in representing Donald Trump at that time. Cohen testified that it was a conspiracy between Giuliani and Costello as of this date. Totally false. In any event, he also said that he didn't discuss the Stormy Daniels matter with us, and he certainly did. I specifically asked him because he kept on going back saying, I can't believe they're trying to put me in jail for these NDAs. So I said, Michael, tell me about the NDA. Tell me about Stormy Daniels. What did you do? He said, I got a call from a lawyer representing Stormy Daniels who represented that she was going to testify that Donald Trump had sex with Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen said, I didn't believe the allegation, but I knew that such an allegation would be terribly embarrassing. He said it would be embarrassing. He focused on Melania Trump. He said, I didn't want to embarrass Melania Trump. He said, that's why I decided to take care of this on my own. I went back to that several times. You did this on your own? On my own. Did Donald Trump have anything to do with it? No. Did you get the money from Donald Trump? No. From any of his organizations? No. From anybody connected to Donald Trump? No. Where did you get the money? I took out a HELOC loan against my property. I said, why would you do that? He said, I didn't want anybody to know where I got this money. I didn't want Melania to know. I didn't want my own wife to know because she's in charge, he said, of the Cohen family finances. He said if she saw money coming out of my account, she'd ask me 100 questions, and I didn't want to answer any of them. It was clear after talking to him for several days after that, whenever we talked on the phone or in my office, that he kept on bringing up the subject that he felt he was betrayed by not being brought down to Washington, D.C. This guy thought, he said to me, that he should have been Attorney General of the United States, or at least the chief assistant to the president. Ludicrous, but that's what he thought. And he was very angry about that. He wanted to do something to put himself back into the inner circle of Donald Trump. That's why he took care of this on his own. There had to be a motivation. Michael Cohen is always working for things that benefit himself. And that's what he was doing here. That's completely different to what he said that he told the grand jury. That's completely different to what he's testifying to in New York. Nobody has heard this side of the equation.
Right.
Well, we have two Florida representatives. They were in the courtroom today, Congressman Matt Gaetz and Congressman Michael Waltz. But you can provide information by being in that courtroom.
Blanche had brilliantly set the case up and just reminding everyone, heck, even reminding me of all of the hearings where Cohen had lied, the intelligence committee that he had lied to about Russia, then how he lied to his own lawyer about lying, then how he lied to the judge about lying. He pled guilty to lying and then lied about that. So he brilliantly set the case up and then set the trap. And it was a my cousin Vinny moment. The other thing, Sean, you nailed it. This is a dark moment in American history. And what I still can't get over is seeing Joe Biden's number 3 official from the Department of Justice sitting right there next to the prosecutor, just feet away from President Trump, who is leading Biden in the polls.
But the biggest lie he told, he was caught lying on the stand. You never see that. It was a my cousin Vinny moment because he never spoke to Trump about the closure of this deal he supposedly orchestrated, and the jury was aghast.
By the way, I don't think Trump even told Michael Cohen to do that. Did you see Michael Cohen's lawyer saying how Michael Cohen took it upon himself to do that and then stole money?
And then Michael Cohen stole $50,000 from Trump.
Yeah, he thought he was going to get a promotion to do that. Yeah.
Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts in his so-called hush money trial, making him the first former U.S. president in history to be convicted of a felony. So why are Trump and many others attacking the judge in this case? Well, there's more than one issue, but here's the latest one. Judge Juan Merchan gave the jurors 55 pages worth of instructions before they adjourned for deliberations. According to some tweets, he told the jurors that they didn't need to agree on what crime Trump committed, which seemed pretty fishy to people since jury convictions require a unanimous verdict. And this made it sound like the judge said it didn't have to be unanimous at all. Well, this set off a slew of outrage and confusing headlines, and lots of accusations of a rigged trial. But wait, is that true? Guess what? It's complicated. Bet you totally saw that one coming. Okay, let's dig in, people. The jury did need to be unanimous, as in 12 out of 12 in their decision to convict Trump. What was Trump actually charged with? Well, that's the confusing part. So the basics are that during the 2016 presidential campaign, Trump's then lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid Stormy Daniels hush money to not talk about how she had an affair with Donald Trump. When Trump reimbursed Cohen, the money was categorized as legal fees, which it was not. So, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg charged Trump with falsifying business records. So, it's not the paying the hush money that was the crime. It was not labeling it as hush money. But, in New York State, falsifying business records is not a felony unless Trump falsified business records in order to commit or conceal a second crime. What's the second crime? Bragg eventually argued that Trump violated an obscure state election law. That law makes it illegal to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means. So, somewhat ironically, the prosecutors were accusing Trump of trying to rig the 2016 election. And that's why he was covering up his hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. But hold on. Because for Trump to have actually broken that election law, prosecutors have to argue that Trump did something illegal to interfere with the election. That's the unlawful means. And here's where it gets really confusing. The judge gave the jurors a choice of 3 possible unlawful means that Trump had to have done in order to interfere with the election. Those are either violating federal campaign finance laws or falsifying other business records. Not the Michael Cohen hush money ones, but other ones. Or violating tax laws by putting false information on tax forms. Each juror had to believe that Trump did at least one of these 3 things, but they didn't have to agree on which one he did. That's the part that people were tweeting about incorrectly. But I can't really blame them because what I just explained to you was not something you could cover in a tweet. It's a PhD dissertation. So to recap, in order to convict Trump, jurors had to unanimously agree that he falsified business records in order to conceal that he was breaking the law to interfere in the 2016 election. They just didn't have to agree on how he broke the law to interfere in the election, which was not the crime he was actually on trial for. There were a lot of dicey things about this case from the very beginning, like the fact that Trump could be found guilty for just causing the business records to be falsified. He didn't have to do it himself or even explicitly order it to be done, or the fact that DA Bragg apparently pushed his prosecutors to scour the penal code for a secondary crime that would make this a felony. That's when they eventually found what the New York Times called an obscure state election law. And the Times also called it a novel and untested theory, because the DA was trying to apply a state election law to a federal election. All this really makes it seem like, well, a rigged trial. It reads like instead of starting with a known crime and trying to prove that Trump committed it, DA Alvin Bragg was starting with Donald Trump and searching for a crime to pin on him. Which is why even people who aren't big fans of Trump think this trial was politically motivated. You have to admit certain things don't help that perception, like Trump being scheduled for sentencing on July 11th, just 4 days before the GOP convention. But I'm sure that this case and all these other trials against Trump that are seemingly being rushed are all just coincidences.
How long have you known Alvin Bragg?
Same answer.
Fifth Amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you respect Alvin Bragg?
Same answer.
And how frequently did you go to the office when you were a special district?
I'm not going to answer your question about how often I was physically at the offices of the Manhattan District Attorney.
Did you have your own desk there?
Again, I'm not going to respond to your question.
On the basis of what?
On the basis of the 5th paragraph of my statement. Conveniently, Mr. Castor, the 5th paragraph relates to the 5th Amendment.
So, since you've left the employ of the Manhattan VA, do you use email as a method of communication?
I decline to answer your question.
Who's your current email provider?
I decline to answer that question as well.
On the 5th Amendment grounds?
Yes, sir.
And who's your current cell phone provider?
Likewise, I refuse to answer that question on the basis of my rights under the 5th Amendment. I acknowledge writing the book, but I'm not going to expand beyond what is contained in the book for the reasons reflected in my opening statement.
Did they really say go get it?
Again, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to respond beyond what is printed in the book.
Did they not say go get it?
I'm not going to answer your question.